Opening shot thoughts tonight. What was that federal show of force in the loop really about this weekend? By now, you've probably seen the images of camouflaged, masked federal agents with heavy weaponry marching through the city on a beautiful fall Sunday, onlookers greeting them with either scorn or perhaps praise, but mostly confusion. If the mission is to go after the most violent undocumented immigrants, why do they think they're going to find them in one of the safest parts of the city? All this comes as tensions have escalated outside the Broadview ICE facility, with a steady stream of protesters trying to disrupt the actions of federal agents detaining suspected undocumented immigrants. Today, the Department of Justice announced that 5 protesters were in custody for their actions in Broadview, 2 of whom allegedly were armed. It does underscore the elevated safety risks that federal agents are now facing. And amid this, the troubling news that a CBS 2 reporter who was simply observing the scene was shot at with chemical munitions unprovoked while she was in her vehicle. She says her face burned and she spent hours puking. The Broadview Police Department says it's now investigating. And beyond that, Broadview officials claim the agents have, quote, declared war on their community. The local police chief Mills saying he's never been treated with so much disrespect. One can only conclude that one of the chief parties to blame for the safety risks of federal agents are the federal agents themselves and their superiors. Unlike the Chicago Police Department, there's no discernible use of force policy. There's no discernible de-escalation or crowd control policy. Just apparent chaos. That threatens the safety of onlookers and police officers alike. Which brings me back to my original question. If we're to believe Governor Pritzker that 60% of those detained have no criminal convictions, then this is not primarily about violent criminals. What is it really about then? For starters, so it's about this: content. Content for social media, optics, federal agents walking among the bean, among Millennium Park, among hordes of protesters and catching them while running them down. What happens next? Social media accounts that parrot the federal government's talking points spray their images to the followers in hopes that they go viral, proclaiming, quote, "This is what I voted for." Then opponents spreading the disturbing images to their followers, warning that this is fascism. We're in the attention economy right now, in case you didn't know, and everybody's competing for your eyeballs, hearts, and minds. And in the crosshairs, our city of Chicago, which mostly didn't ask for this. Deport violent criminals, sure. Disrupt brunch goers on a lazy Sunday? I'm not so sure. Given the elevated rhetoric on both sides, I can only say it appears this disruption is here to stay, and it's only going to get worse. Tonight, Governor Pritzker says the Trump administration is mobilizing 100 federal troops to join the activities in Chicago after federal immigration agents stroll around the loop and face escalating tensions in Broadview. President Trump announces a deal to spin off TikTok, with some top allies and titans of business now in control. Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. Governor Pritzker and Illinois Democratic elected officials defiant today after the weekend saw armed federal troops walking around the loop. Pritzker says the federal government is now planning to send 100 military troops to Chicago to assist with immigration enforcement. Pritzker and Mayor Johnson say they believe authoritarianism is creeping in.
I refuse to stay silent about this and let the slow encroachment of our freedoms and liberties continue unabated. The state of Illinois and all of us will continue to fight this with everything that we have.
This comes on the heels of the revelation that was reported on MSNBC that Tom Homan, the so-called border czar, accepted a $50,000 bribe from undercover FBI agents in exchange for lucrative detention center contracts. So let's call it what it is. Tom Homan sold out the American people for $50,000 in cash.
And joining us to weigh in is Ed Yohnka, Policy and Communications Director with the ACLU of Illinois, Rendon, head of the Resurrection Project, and Robert Pape, the founder of the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats. That's a group that's been researching American political violence going back to January 6, 2020. Thank you all of you for joining us. I'll start with you, Ed Yohnka. On a legal basis, is it legal for these troops to be marching with their guns out in the city, broad daylight, with no apparent public safety purpose here, because catching violent undocumented immigrants doesn't seem like the Loop is the place to do that.
Right. I think one of the problems is that federal officials have the ability to enforce federal law where they want, which has always been one of the problems. The problem that we have with this administration is as you pointed out in your opening, is that so much of this is just performative, right? The marching up and down Michigan Avenue isn't intended to actually take into custody anyone who's dangerous or someone who's posing a public safety threat. What it's really intended to do is to send a shock among the body politic, to say that we're here and we're in charge and not your local officials. And I think it's dangerous, and I think we're reaching a point where someone is going to get hurt because these officials don't understand what their role is and are trying to overreach in everything that they do.
And we've already seen people get hurt. We mentioned that CBS 2 reporter.
Yeah.
We know that federal agents also face elevated risks here. But Robert Pape, what do you think this show of force is about in Chicago and then in the Broadview, where we've seen these escalating tensions every single day over the last week?
I think this is a show of force. I think it's important to say that. It's a classic show of force use of the U.S. military. What I say further is that it's reckless. Whether intended to provoke or not, this is reckless because we are clearly tempting fate, where this show of force could easily provoke an actor, maybe two actors here, maybe people that are volatile for their own reasons, to do something like, oh, I've got an old grenade from an old war. Let's lob it at that group. Well, that would not represent all of Chicago. That wouldn't represent the people in the city. But what would happen is that would then be plastered all over the social media as if Chicago had done that. This is reckless in the extreme. When we are overseas, we rarely do patrols in a situation like this, where we have know that these kind of tempting of fate events could happen that could spin things out of control. So I thoroughly think this should stop. And I think that this is, I don't think it matters whether it's for TikTok or not. This is way more reckless than just a PR stunt.
And certainly it would seem that it would endanger folks' lives, including the agents that are involved here. Rendon, you mentioned earlier in this press conference, you were very emotional, but that as far as we know, there are about 200 people detained in this Broadview facility. What do we know about their conditions, and what can you say about their ability to talk to lawyers and to have their cases heard?
Yeah, so we get reports from family members of folks who are detained in Broadview. First of all, Broadview is not a detention facility. It is a processing center. And so therefore, it is not equipped to have folks stay overnight. That means there are no beds, there are no showers, there's no cafeteria. And so it's whatever kind of food comes in for the day that's available. And then there's also no secured lines for attorneys to be able to speak with any clients or anybody who is detained there. There's no way of scheduling those calls, and so once somebody is, kidnapped from the streets of Chicago or the suburbs, they're taken to Broadview, where we are not able to get a hold of anybody who's in there. And we've been hearing reports from the family members of most folks cannot even lay down on the floor to sleep because it is so crowded. There's anywhere between 150 to 200 people there every single day.
And Ed Yohnka, I mean, to be clear, even if you're undocumented, do you have the rights that a citizen would have? You have the right to a counsel, the right to the certain things that seem to be being denied right now.
Absolutely. Remember, our Constitution and our Bill of Rights protect everyone, no matter your immigration status. So all of the rights that we have as citizens is the same for people who are here without documentation. And by the way, once the government takes those people into detention, or once they take them into custody, they also have a constitutional obligation to assure that they're cared for. And that's something that we're seeing both here and around the country isn't being met.
All right, Ed, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because we have much more to go, but we're going to take a break right now. Back with our panel right after this.